I don't know.
Say it with me. I don't know.
Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Looking at the news and what's going on in the world, you need to have a good answer for that stuff. And I think Christianity has maybe it's not a good answer, but they have an answer. And so now that I don't have that, reevaluating everything from the bottom is my main sort of goal at the moment.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 149 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Dr. Bob Pondillo and I interview Japh Thomson of Tasmania, Australia. Japh is 35, married with one child and one on the way, a computer programmer raised in the Assembly of God denomination. He became a master puppeteer in children's ministry, served in missions in Belarus, and taught college courses in Bible college on techniques for teaching children in church. Today, he's an atheist, and his Christian mother asked him upon his coming out one of the most poignant questions I've ever heard a believing parent ask a non-believing child. Also, we learn a little bit about the Tasmanian Devil. At least these devils are real. When Japh shared his experience in missions in Belarus and about the horrific tragedies he witnessed, especially in the lives of children affected by the nuclear fallout of Chernobyl 30 years later and the poverty of the hospitals there, I wanted to know more about this country. This former Soviet republic is a landlocked country in Eastern Europe, bordered by Russia in the northeast, Ukraine in the south, Poland in the west, and Lithuania and Latvia in the northwest. Belarus was occupied by the Nazis between 1941 and 1944, when 2.2 million of its people were killed, including almost all of its large Jewish population. It declared its independence in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell. Belarus has been ruled with an increasingly iron fist since 1994 by President Alexander Lukashenko, now reigning in his fifth term. Opposition figures are subjected to harsh penalties for organizing protests. The government controls all the media and press, including laws that make insulting the president punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Government intimidation, harassment, and censorship of independent media is routine, and journalists have been killed in suspicious circumstances. I say all this as a lesson that we should desperately guard the freedom of speech, a free press, and the ability to ridicule the ridiculous. We should be leery when people who create fake news accuse the real news of being fake. And we should take notice when people in power can't take a joke. We think too much of ourselves when we can't laugh at ourselves or handle critical feedback. A female activist, Desiree Ferruz, 61 years old, was convicted this week in America on criminal misdemeanor charges and sentenced to 6 months jail time for laughing during Attorney General Jeff Sessions' confirmation hearing. Trump's boycott of the annual Correspondents' Dinner this week is inappropriate, and his misgivings about reality are beyond the pale. We must notice these things and resist. These are just bipartisan facts. Speaking of inappropriate, this word came up in a talk I had with my wife this week as she described something someone posted on Facebook. She used the word inappropriate a few times, and each time she said it, it jumped out at me more and more. I intuited that there was something significant going on here, especially in regards to the effects of Christianity on human agency. First, there are two kinds of appropriate, social and individual. When someone does something socially inappropriate, it is due to context, wrong place or wrong time. Personal inappropriateness has to do with someone doing or saying something inconsistent or unfitting with their character, and thus not their own. The word appropriate comes from a Latin word which means fastened, fitting, or to take as one's own. So if it fits, it's appropriate in the adjective form. It's right and or proper. And if one appropriates something, as in the verb form, they make it their own. For example, after taping this conversation with Japh, I was working on this opening essay, and I wrote him and asked him for his thoughts on appropriateness, given the definitions that I just gave you. He responded with this, quote, "I'm very big on customizing things in my life. If something is mine, I like to make it uniquely mine. Engraving on my laptop or devices, etc. My wife isn't a huge fan of tattoos, but for me, this is a way I'd really like to customize even my body to be more me. I only have one so far, but I'd really like to get an Ouroboros tattoo somewhere discreet. The Ouroboros is the snake in a circle biting its own tail, and it represents wholeness and self-reliance. I love it." Unquote. These are examples of Japh appropriating things. It should not go without saying here that if you're going to customize your own things with stickers or symbols or even your own body with tattoos that represent things that you identify with or are important to you, you're going to need to have explored those questions for yourself. What do I like? What am I into? To what do I intimately relate or identify with? These are questions of agency and differentiation, of which we've talked a lot about on this show. A Christian trained to distrust their own likes and interests is going to shut down such questions and surrender their own interests to be subjugated by the likes of God or Jesus. A devout Christian only asks, "What does God want with my life? He bought me with his blood. I'm a servant of the Most High and proud of my chains." But what happens to a mind that believes that they are not their own, that this is not their home, that they are in the world but not of it, that life begins at death when they enter eternity with their heavenly body in the presence of the King of Kings? To a religious zealot, the customs, traditions, and cultures of earth are repugnant to their jealous God, and they end up not knowing or caring what's appropriate in this life. My personal history is riddled with examples when I did or said something that was inappropriate, perhaps because I felt I was being led by the Holy Spirit. Some were huge, life-altering mistakes. Keep in mind that to a devout believer, their loyalty is first and foremost to God. And if given an ultimatum, they will, like Peter said in Acts 5:29, obey God, not men. John Piper, popular author and chancellor of Bethlehem College and Seminary in Minneapolis, whom I used to admire as a Christian, wrote on his blog that the new calamity is the normalization and institutionalization of homosexuality by the nation's highest court. The Southern Baptist Convention recently issued a statement that called the recent legalization of same-sex marriage across the country a cultural tipping point, and stated that believers must gird themselves with spiritual weapons in a battle that ultimately is spiritual. They must also plead with God to, quote, move on our behalf, even though our government, and in this case the Supreme Court, has made a decision that flies in the face of God himself, unquote. They believe that their stance is bringing persecution upon them. Thomas Schreiner, a professor of theology and New Testament at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, said that the Christian response to the cultural winds, quote, will lead to tensions with our families and our friends who simply cannot understand us, unquote. Yeah, real people living in the real world using common sense and genuine love don't have a fucking clue what you people are thinking. My point is that without agency and the humility to be teachable by people outside your tribe, you will not understand what is culturally appropriate, and thus your behavior and the things you say will make no sense to those who are not in your cult, thus the two Americas in which we find ourselves. But back to this word appropriate. It comes from a Latin word associated with a garment fitting one's body. You put it on and fasten it up, and it fits, and it becomes yours. It looks good on you. It's appropriate. As a friend might say outside the fitting room, it's you. When 21st century humans put on ancient garments that have not evolved over time with enlightenment, education, and progress, it doesn't fit. It's not you. It's not us, and it doesn't look good on you. Trust me. I found our guest today, Japh Thomson, to be a very together person, especially for a relatively young man at age 35. You'll hear that he's a collector of hobbies, that he seeks out that which he finds interesting, and he makes it his own. For example, he's a collector of coffees from around the world, and different methods of roasting and brewing espressos. He also collects bonsai trees and trims, pairs, and maintains them to regulate their growth and shape. He learns from the world and adapts it to make it his own. He appropriates things to fit himself. He personalized his laptop, for example. That's personal appropriation. Cultural appropriation is what is fitting in one's circumstance. When one speaks out of turn or says something not relevant or even offensive to the subject matter at hand, or demonstrates by doing or saying something that they do not understand what is real or what is happening, we call that inappropriate. It was unfitting, not fastened, and does not belong to them. Imagine you're in a conversation. This could be at work or a bar or at a party with friends, and you're wondering if you have anything to offer the conversation. Is there something I could say that would be appropriate, fitting, fastened, and my own? Imagine that such a conversation is like a greased pig running around the room, and your attempt to engage with people via this conversation is like trying to tackle and contain that greased pig. But you want to try nonetheless. But you keep in mind, if you know yourself and the types of pigs you've caught in the past, you will know whether or not to even try. If you say something that indicates to everyone else that you clearly do not grasp what is happening here, you do not seize the pig. It slips through your hands because what you've said is inappropriate. It did not fit the topic, nor did it fit you or look good on you. Therefore, it was not fastened because you couldn't wrap your head around it, and you did not own it, the pig or the concept. This is Trump. This is many Christians, I know. Hell, this can be anyone who doesn't know themselves or love themselves. They don't know their own strengths and weaknesses. They don't like themselves, and thus they have to wear a mask in fear of being seen. They feel like a poser, and thus they have to pose. They're an imposter, and thus they have to impose. They don't know when to shut up and when to speak up. And until they learn to think for themselves and stop trying to fit in, they will always be prone to do and say inappropriate things. And by now, you probably know why I know all this. I'll end with this quote from Nietzsche. Quote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Unquote. And I'll add, to appropriate yourself. We taped this conversation on April 6th, 2017. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was created by the Barry Orchestra, found at barryorchestra.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
No, you won't, 'cause you're gone, 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 gone.
Hello.
Good day.
Good day, mate.
Good day, Australia. How you doing? Is this Japh?
This is Japh.
Okay, Japh. Hi, it's Bob.
Hey, Bob. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well, very well. And Cass is over there. Well, it's good to have you. It's neat to know that we're heard in English-speaking countries around the world.
Yeah,
now.
we are.
Australia and United Kingdom, Canada, which is almost English-speaking, I suppose.
Well, Japh, thanks for coming on, man, all the way on the other side of the world.
Yeah, it's Friday.
Yeah, Friday morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's Thursday evening here. So.
Well, you're a Patreon supporter, and you contacted us, and I just said, hey, if you ever want to share your story on the podcast, let's talk about that. And Japh agreed to do so. So welcome.
I sure did.
So Japh, are you? Let's find out about you, man. About your story. You know, we live here in the United States. There's we got a lot of crazy Christians, and I was wondering if you have the same sort of thing there. Do you have people on television huckstering for money and just off the chart kind of Christians?
Yeah, I'd definitely say that there are some similarities, but it's much smaller. I'm more surprised by the differences for sure. I think a lot of the time, if I listen to too much Christian stuff coming out of the US, and then I talk with a pastor here, they'll have a very, very different opinion. Like I find it's much easier to find a pastor here who's accepting of old Earth, for example, whereas young Earth seems to be more popular in the US and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sadly, that's very true. Yeah.
They're less science denying out there.
Yeah.
They're down there.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a lot more embracement of science, and I wonder if that's also a contributing factor in the growing number of atheists in Australia.
Yeah.
Could be.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're how old are you?
So I'm 35.
Okay.
Born and raised in an Assemblies of God church here in my hometown, and yeah, it's probably about 10 years ago that I started my journey away from that.
How about that?
Your parents still religious?
My mum definitely is, and my dad still considers himself a Christian, though he doesn't attend church any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are they still together?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
You got siblings?
I have a sister who's a couple of years younger than me.
Mm-hmm. Where is she on the spectrum of religion?
Probably has not really considered herself a Christian for longer than I, but she kind of is one of those who has decided that she's not practicing and she is just not going to think about it.
Yeah, it's a non-issue.
Right, yeah, exactly. She kind of wishes she could believe it.
She kind of wishes?
Yeah, she feels like there's something there, but church isn't for her, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, the need for there to be a God is pretty strong in most humans as far as being meaning-making, but the calculation of, well, there's so much evil in the world and, et cetera, that it's like, well, if there is one, as we had a person on a recent episode said, he's pretty fucked up or pretty disengaged,
Right, where's he at?
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
That wishing that there was one, I get that. I mean, I think it'd be nice if there was somebody watching the shop. The chaos of the universe is not a very comforting thought.
Right. Yeah. I think my wife kind of wishes there was one too, but
Okay.
but she's much more in line with my thinking on it.
How long you been married?
I should know this off the top of my head. It was 9 years last month.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, congrats.
And I noticed when we were trying to set up a time to meet here tonight, which is unique to us. Bob and I usually tape this show on Saturday and Sunday mornings at 10:30.
Yeah.
And we are on a Thursday night at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. Central Time, which is what time there?
It's 11 a.m. here.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And you're in the future.
That's right.
How's
It
looking?
11 a.m. Friday, that's right. Things are looking bleak depending where you look.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Do you have a crazy president like we do?
We can see yours from all the way over here, don't worry.
Yeah,
Oh,
my
I bet.
gosh.
Man,
He's a spectacle for sure.
that's for sure. A laughing stock, I'm sure.
But what I was saying was in the process of trying to set up a time, you had to help with your children and your pregnant wife, right?
Yeah, that's right. My wife is about 26 weeks along for our second child at the moment.
Oh, well, congratulations.
yes,
and
congratulations.
Hope that goes well.
Yeah. Exactly where in Australia are you, Japh?
So I'm in Hobart, which is the capital city of a state called Tasmania, and Tasmania is an island state off the bottom of mainland Australia.
Oh, okay. I didn't. So Tasmania. Oh, the Devils are. The
Devil,
Tasmanian
yeah.
Devils. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Have you ever seen one there in the wild?
yeah, plenty.
Oh, my.
Really? Are they? I don't even know what they are, to tell you the truth. Are they like little animals or something? What
Are they marsupial?
They are marsupials. Yeah, they're kind of they're mostly black. They have kind of a white stripe on their back and kind of a pinkish face, and they're probably about the size of a cat, but a lot more stocky.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Wow. And why do they call them devils anyway?
They're mostly carrion eaters, so they don't really like kill things. But if you leave something out, like if you were camping and left
Like a
something
raccoon.
out, they'll take it, and they make a pretty ghastly noise too when they're fighting for each other over food. So I imagine if you didn't know they weren't likely to kill you, that would freak you out enough.
Yeah.
That's good. That's interesting.
So give us a sample of what you think that a sample of what they sound like.
What they sound like? Oh boy.
Oh, I don't think I can even do it. It's kind of this it's like a hissing, kind of screaming, kind of
Okay.
snarling kind of noise. Yeah.
Okay. There's the devil for you right there.
So, all right. I Googled you. Are you a computer guy?
I am a computer guy, yes.
Okay, yeah. What do you do for a living?
I used to specialize in a content management system called WordPress, which probably most people know, and that's probably mostly what I might come up as when you're Googling me. I did that for quite a long time, and these days I'm more involved in cloud computing and sort of the architecture behind setting up that stuff for enterprise clients.
Well, being Assembly of God, as a child, I mean, how serious was your Christianity?
Yeah, pretty serious. So between the ages of 4 to 8, I guess, I had a lot of questions. How things work, what's God doing, why do these things happen if God's such a good God, that kind of stuff.
You were questioning early.
Yeah, and so, you're obviously heavily influenced by your parents. I gave my life to Jesus, I suppose you would say, around about age 5. And so, yeah, I was really into it from then. There weren't a great deal of kids at my church. And so from there, I ended up helping to teach kids' church once I was a bit older, went into youth leading. I did a lot of sort of outreach ministry, particularly to children, and helped to teach a course at the local Bible college on communicating Christianity to kids through things like puppetry.
Wow, how about that? You were into it.
Puppet ministry is a big part of churches,
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
Yeah. You tell the stories, the Bible stories via...
Do you have little socks that come up and talk?
Well,
and
puppets,
stuff?
yeah.
Puppets and what have you?
Yeah.
We had more like Sesame Street style puppets.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
With the sticks to move the arms and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, or two people, one for hands and one for mouth.
Oh, wow. This was yeah.
A big production.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, serious business. That's right.
Huh.
If you're helping out with children's ministry as a young teen or preteen, I mean, it carried further into your young adult years.
So probably right up until early 20s, I was still helping with ministering to kids and youth. Also did a missions trip to Belarus to visit a church over there and help out with that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was probably around that time that my faith really started to waver. I kind of realized that life is a bit of an onion, and you got to make your way through the layers gradually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
What were the layers for you? Like, what was the first thing to go?
So we saw a lot of interesting things. It was kind of a humanitarian aid mission to Belarus. So we saw a lot of kids suffering from leukemia, from the radiation there. We saw a whole hospital full of burns patients. The hospital didn't have any funding. And so there were lots of sort of things like that we saw over there. And so I really struggled with the disparity between my life here in Australia and what life was like in Belarus. Yeah. And so that got me questioning again, for sure.
Yeah. I think whenever you see suffering firsthand, boy, that's a cognitive dissonance right away.
Yeah, definitely.
It wasn't doctrinal stuff. It wasn't like heaven and hell. It was more, my gosh, look at these people. How come they're not, where's God?
Yeah, well, so that was a bit of a shakeup, and I took that moment to take a step back and say, okay, well, if these things are happening, in theory, God's in control of all this, but like how and why, and what does that mean for me, and how is the church helping, and then from there it was, what does Jesus say church should actually be, and then looking at the church and going, I don't feel like what I'm experiencing as church is what Jesus was preaching church.
Okay, so those are the steps. When you're a Christian, you get the big picture of God, Jehovah, the Father, and just the Creator and all the stuff. And you like the fact that there's somebody watching the shop. And then when you see that God the Father is kind of a dick, then you kind of move down to Jesus, and you're going, oh, well, at least Jesus was cool. Yeah. And if this church, and if the church abroad was really modeling Jesus, then this would be good. Is that your path?
Right, yeah. So the explanation behind God's dickish behavior is often that, well, free will and stuff. And so I was thinking, well, if we have free will, perhaps the problem is that we're not emulating Jesus more accurately. And so if we were, then we would be helping out more in these sorts of situations.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that in your young adult life, you start backing out, and yet you're this kind of a principal character in the children's ministry. Was there any kind of drama around you going to the pastor and saying, I'm not going to do this anymore?
There was kind of a little bit of drama, but not directly around me. One of the big problems was my mom was the children's minister for the church.
Okay.
And so she ran all of that stuff, and that's
how you got into it.
Yeah. But there was kind of a change of leadership at the church, and during that process, there was some unpleasantness that resulted in Mum basically being ousted from her position.
Oh boy!
Whoa! Why? What'd she do?
Yeah, exactly. She didn't really. It's super difficult to be able to talk objectively about it because I wasn't necessarily directly exposed to what happened, and I'm trying to remember something that's from a decade ago, but it certainly seemed at the time. Essentially, it was down to just mishandling the situation by the new pastor for the church.
Yeah,
and him getting certain information from someone at the church that was a friend of his and who had her own interests in mind and incidentally became the new sort of head of the children's ministry. So It was a kind of a power play, really.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds
a
like
coup.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the reason that I caught that as a big deal is that every church I've ever served in, my wife was serving in the children's ministry, and there was always a deficit of children's workers, like, because everybody wanted to be in the sanctuary with the pastor and with the action and with the music. And so to go off and help with the children was a little sacrificial on most people's part. And so it was hard to find children's workers. And so to literally run one off, there had to be a lot of politics going on there.
some kind of politics, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely politics at play. And so I basically stepped out of that role at that point and stepped right on out of the church at that point as well.
Well, that was your out.
Yeah, exactly. I just felt like not only is this thing that I feel isn't the way Jesus would want it, as like this particular situation is definitely not how I felt Jesus would handle it. So,
right. Well, especially when they're screwing your mom over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I took that opportunity to try and have a look around for other churches that I felt maybe better representing what I felt was the way things should be in a church. And I never found that really. And so I started questioning a lot of that stuff. And I'm not one to see a thread hanging and not pull it. But
at age 4 you were pulling strings. So
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I did actually kind of so I kind of was pulling on threads there, and then I realized, it is just like pulling a thread. You notice, oh no, I'm going to unravel this whole thing if I keep pulling on that. And so I kind of left it, and I actually didn't do a great deal about it and just kind of opted out of thinking about it altogether for quite a few years there.
That's lovely. So all this time that you spent, you spent a considerable amount of time and effort, and you just poured planning. You poured your life into it, really. You were able to just, as you say, walk away without second thought, or?
Well, I would think once they screw your mom over,
to hell with it.
Yeah, it was so being a Pentecostal, charismatic kind of church, I had always had sort of issues with various things that involve, right, like speaking in tongues and interpretations and things.
Okay.
Yeah, I really struggled with the logic behind that and how it was beneficial.
There is no logic.
That's it, yeah. So that's what, I don't know a lot about Assemblies of God, and I didn't realize I thought they were more Anglican, but apparently not.
No, not at all.
No.
Very charismatic.
Okay. Wow. So they're speaking in tongues, putting their hands on you.
It's one of the wildest denominations when it comes to experiential stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, laying on of hands and speaking in tongues and
gold
healings.
Dust coming down.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, being slain in the spirit, I think is what they call it. And so I definitely struggled with a lot of that. So I was questioning these things all the way through, and I could, even though I grew up in this situation, I could never really bring myself to, have a message in tongues or anything like that, because, I know in myself, if I do that, I am making it up.
Yeah.
That's all that's happening right there. And
you're just way too logical, Japh.
Yeah.
that did appear to be the problem for sure. And I was thinking, what happens if someone else has an interpretation for me making something up? Like this, I can't.
Oh, and they will.
Yeah, exactly. And I just couldn't, and it would be the same guy too as every other time. And so I just couldn't embrace that. And so I was really struggling with a lot of these sorts of things. And so when this happened, and like you say, if someone sort of screws over your mom, then you're like, no, I've had enough.
So it was, I think with Assemblies of God, a lot of times at the end of the service, there's this ministry time where the music is playing and the pastor is inviting people to come forward to be prayed for.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody like lay hands on your forehead and try to slay you?
Oh, yeah. I was pushing back.
Okay. Wait, okay, hold on. Wait. How's this go?
You know what? In almost 150 episodes almost, we really haven't talked much about
being slain?
Slain in the spirit.
Now, right there, that would stop me. Nobody's slaying me. Put the sword away. I'm cool.
No, it's not to kill you. But
what the hell is it
then? The power and the presence of God is so overwhelming that you pass out.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's the
not
theory
really,
for sure. I think I think what's going on is that you've had your eyes closed for so long, you've started to feel disoriented, and someone pushes you.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you fall down.
So,
Yeah.
Bob, you've seen Benny Hinn.
Oh,
right?
yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, that's
where
what it is.
Where he
Is it-
whacks people and
Well,
hits
wax
them.
people, or just
Yep.
you're laying your hand on their forehead and you kind of push back.
them. Yeah.
And there's always these important guys at the Assembly of God service, and
Yeah.
they're the spotters. The spotters. They catch the women. They catch everybody.
Oh.
And then there's the women that come along and put a little blanket over the women if they've got a dress on.
Yep.
Hold on a second.
I must have pushed a button on my phone.
Oh, with your butt.
Sorry.
So wait, okay, can we go back to the
The
spotters?
Doobie Brothers were rocking down the highway.
That's right. But anyway, so you say the women put a little black.
Well, if a woman is slain in the spirit and she has a dress on,
yeah.
then she's gonna,
Oh,
be
right.
a little exposed.
You've got to preserve her modesty.
Yeah.
And how do
all
you
this
do that?
is part of the service. Yeah, they have little blankets around ready to cover up the women when they're slain, and they'll lay there for whatever as long as the music's playing, they'll lay there. That's what I say.
Yeah, pretty much.
And they lay there.
They'll lay there as if they're passed out. Here's the thing. Let's talk
okay.
about the psychology of this, because
All right.
if God is this wonderful, beautiful, powerful maker of the sun and sunset and the cosmos, all the planets, and He touches you, how special are you going to feel?
Oh yeah.
Right.
I guess that would make you faint.
Well, you get not only are you getting touched by the pastor, which by then in these types of churches, the pastor is a charismatic super dude. In mega churches where this type of charismatic services are going on, the pastor is escorted in by bodyguards. I kid you fucking not.
Really?
Mega churches, 2,000, 3,000 type seat auditoriums.
Look out! Here he comes. Huh?
Yeah, and it's a big deal. And not only, I mean, we're talking about the presence of God being powerful, but the closer you are to God, the more power you carry.
And there's the pastor who's got bodyguards.
He is the pastor, so he spends 7 days a week in the closet seeking God's face, and now he's going to enter the room, and you could just feel the presence of God on this man.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that we talk about.
Yeah.
No kidding.
There's a hierarchy.
And that's what happened to you, Japh, or that's your experience in your church there.
Other than the bodyguards, that's exactly what happened. Particularly if there was a guest, a guest speaker from somewhere else. Like our church was pretty heavily affiliated with Hillsong Church. You may have heard of.
Well, that came out of Australia.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's a big deal. Let's stop there for a second.
Okay, I don't
because
know anything about this.
The music. All right, so praise and worship music.
Yeah.
And you got to YouTube this, Bob, because people get high. People get drunk in the spirit. People go to these concerts, and the music is so good in a way. I mean, it's so emotional. It's not like good like the Beatles good. It's good in that it really strums your heartstrings.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really designed to amp you up, just really get the energy going.
Yeah, and people leave there feeling the presence of God, having touched the hem of His garment, experienced the power of God, and it's almost like, I've used this metaphor before on this show, but I used to have, when I was a little kid, I had Matchbox cars. Matchbox cars are not motorized; they're just cars.
Yeah, you just push them.
But if you have a track and you have one of these
those loop-de-loop things,
loop-de-loop and round, but the reason that they would do that and keep going, like without your assistance, is that there was this little wheelhouse on the track that had two rubber wheels.
Oh, to kind of spit the car
when
out.
about the time the car was about to lose its momentum, it would arrive at the wheelhouse, and the wheelhouse would shoot it out.
Right. Okay.
Now, the reason I even use that is that for Christians, these type of services are that Wednesday night service, the Sunday morning service, like they got to go to work the next day, and they're going to work in the dark, cold, satanically ruled, evil world. And they're sitting next in a cubicle to non-Christians or even non-Assembly of God or non-Catholic, whatever your denomination is.
Sure.
And so, this to go and get charged.
Oh, you're getting charged up.
Yeah. So this electricity that we're talking about, the experience of the Assembly of God type charismatic church, it's all about touching the power of God and being energized and you feel special. You feel charged by that. So. Getting back to Japh, I like to do commentaries on these things because it's a fascinating thing.
I'm sorry, Japh. I'm learning here. I'm just sitting here amazed that anybody would fall for this shit.
Right?
You know what I mean?
So I think that this is actually a really, really a strong has a really strong effect on people when you are attempting to speak with them about Christianity in general and why they believe what they believe. You can have as many facts and figures and things like that as you like, but people come back to their experiences. And with the church, creating experiences for people like that where they really feel like something has happened, that is very hard to argue with.
Yeah, you can't argue with it.
It's a subjective thing. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, even like forget the guy's name. There was recently a Christian who kind of became an atheist for a while. Science Mike.
Oh, Science Mike. I've heard of him.
And then then he went back, but it was all because he was on the beach and he had an experience. And so even though he's not a scientist, I'm not sure where he gets the science part of his name, but even this is a dead end in conversation as far as not just debate, but point counterpoint or some kind of discussion to where you're talking about facts or truth or whatever. All of that just gets trumped by, I had a personal experience where God visited me personally.
Right. And you can't tell me he didn't.
And you can't tell me he didn't. And we literally can't.
And we can't, right.
And they say, I experienced God, and that's the end of story. So I can see where, I understand, Japh, you're saying that's a conversation
Powerful.
Ender.
It's a pretty hard one because you can continue the conversation and try and, lead the person to see other possibilities.
The functions of the brain.
For the causes of what's happened. Yeah, exactly. But you're getting pretty deep and you are putting them in a position of having to defend something they feel strongly about.
Wow.
That's probably the point at which you should just walk away and leave it for a bit.
Yeah, I think the only thing you could do is go, I had an experience just like that. I mean, if you had one too, I guess the conversation would continue. But if you didn't, if you're just looking at them like, what are you talking about? I can't imagine what you mean.
I think it's two things. I would say, good for you, and it'd be over.
Yeah, right. Isn't that nice?
Or there's another option, because I had this happen to me recently at Vanderbilt. I work in administration.
It's a big university here in town.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was talking to a coworker, and it came up. I just said, well, I'm a former evangelical pastor, and now I'm an atheist. And she immediately just said, well, I'm a Christian, and without hesitation and barely a comma, followed with, God's been really good to me.
Okay, which means God hasn't been pretty good to you, huh? That's why you're.
That
an
might
atheist.
be what she's implying. Yeah,
that's what I would think.
But I think about the fact, Japh, that you experienced really, really hard situations with burn victims and children in hospitals. These are wake-up calls and cognitive they create cognitive dissonances for your faith that God's in this this Disney-esque world.
And don't tell me this is a just world hypothesis. This little kid has got to be burned to a crisp here. Oh, don't worry, it's all in God's way. And
whatever. You're going to pray, and nothing's going to happen. I mean, we know that.
Well, call a doctor, for God's sake.
Yeah, well, no, he's already in the hospital, but I'm just saying that it's a cognitive dissonance. So going back to the response from this woman is, God's been good to me. Well, it's kind of easy. It doesn't take a lot of courage to believe in God when things have gone well for you. Now, ironically, you would think, based on the kind of the premise that I was just supporting or purporting, that when suffering is rampant or prominent, that faith would go down. But it's not true. Really? Actually, the darker, statistically, the harder things are, the more people call on God. They double down as opposed to raise a fist.
Well, they're probably also running out of options.
Yep. Really? That's it. Yeah.
It's literally a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Oh my gosh, that's a great metaphor because it's like it's our last option. We're just going to throw it in the end zone.
Yeah, Hail Mary.
But the truth is that prayer is our last resort because our hospital's not even being funded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I probably just drew a line in the sand and decided I was atheist, and sort of came out, I guess, as atheist about end of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I only spoke with my mum properly about this maybe a month ago.
Oh my gosh.
And how did she react?
And it was really interesting to talk things through, and something that she said to me was basically that talking about prayer, for example, it helped her have a feeling of control. And if she didn't have that, that she just would stress and worry and be just ridden with anxiety. And so for her, that prayer is sort of helps her feel like there's something she can do about it at least. And, you know, if she wakes up in the night and she's worried about something, she can get back to sleep because she has prayer.
Yeah. Like a prophylactic of some kind.
Well, she let go and let God, like you say.
let go, let God. Yeah, I see.
This is fascinating because when somebody, say on Facebook, says, just found out I have breast cancer or whatever tragedy, we, the friends of that person, want to do something.
Yeah, I know.
And especially on Facebook when you can't take them a casserole.
Yeah.
You're miles away or whatever.
I see what you mean.
You want to do something and you feel powerless, like Japh's mom was saying. And also you kind of feel, I don't want to do nothing. I have to express my love for this person somehow.
Because of humanity, yes. Because that person could be you.
And that helplessness is so frustrating. And we're getting back to the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
That when you're out of options, I have to do something and there's literally nothing, then I'll make something up, or at least I'll resort to something that may or may not be true, but at least it relieves my tension and my depression, even that I'm helpless. And I can go back to doing the dishes after I get off Facebook with some kind of a clear conscience.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, I was reading Facebook earlier, and a friend of mine had posted about the chemical attack in Syria,
Oh my God.
which is devastating thing. And she kind of talked about how this horrible stuff is happening, and she kind of signed off with saying that there's not much that she can do, but she can lobby the government to do more about it. She can give money towards the cause, and she can pray. And I've been super careful on Facebook because most of my friends and family are still Christians, and so I try not to be antagonistic. And so I didn't leave a comment, but I thought, isn't that lovely that there's two things you can actually do and for the people, and one thing you can do for yourself.
Oh my gosh, that is so profound.
Yeah, very true too. Yeah, I don't know if I was really sick, somebody would put in "I'm praying for you" or something. I don't know what I'd say to that. Please don't. I have a good doctor. I'm going to the hospital. These are well-trained people who've dedicated their lives to
Sure.
That type of stuff. That's what I'm going to have faith in.
Well, of course, but we just unpacked the psychology of why they're doing it. So even you as an atheist can go, that's her way of reaching out and touching me empathically. And you can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That's the only thing that makes me feel better about it, really, is after having that conversation with Mom, I can go, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
Your praying helps you, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good lesson for me, because I could very easily get all pissed off about it. And what's the point? If it's helping another person, fine. But
right, I struggled with it up until that point. I was like, why are you praying for me? You should be doing something more useful with your time. But I realized, it's a coping mechanism for you, not for me. Okay, that's right then.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, we even used to say within Christianity that prayer doesn't change God, it changes me. And it's funny that they would, in this context, that's an admission of this is not doing a damn thing but making me feel better.
Yeah.
Right.
But you brought up an interesting point, Japh. You said, I'm an atheist now, and a lot of my friends are still Christian. I don't want to be antagonistic and what have you. I was going to ask about that. You said, I guess Australia is a very Christian nation, I suppose, is it?
Is it the prominent religion?
I don't know.
Yeah, it is the prominent religion, but we do also have a decent percentage of others, and consider ourselves a secular country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but still, if somebody, if you would come out as an atheist, people might what would they do to you? Shun you or to try to change you back or something? What would they do?
I guess that's something I've really struggled with a lot, is feeling really alone. And this is sort of how I found this podcast, really. It was initially just feeling so alone in the experience and wanting to talk it through, wanting to hear other people talk it through, but feeling like I don't want to be running around trying to deconvert other people at this point.
You're right.
I admit that after a good YouTube binge of Christopher Hitchens videos, you definitely you start to feel more like it. But
yeah,
you want to be gentle about these sorts of things, and I guess a huge part of it for me right now is how do I. So I might have to go back a little, I guess, and
That's
just
fine.
explain
Go ahead.
sort of what happened with the actual sort of coming out process.
Well, and let me just interject here that as far as timeline goes, 10 years ago is when you really started to deconstruct your faith, but only a year and even a month is when you were coming out to people close to you.
2015 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so for most of those intervening years, I was periodically, I would dip into it and kind of read a bit and adjust my faith and trying to find, I guess, what I felt was most representative in the Bible, but also what matched up with reality. And as it turns out, that's pretty difficult. And so I started with reading a book called The Language of God by Francis S. Collins.
Yeah, I know that.
Who's behind the Human Genome Project and things like that. And I thought this is a respectable scientist who is a Christian and has written about these kinds of things, so I might have a read. And this is where I sort of was first exposed to the God of the Gaps kind of theory. And I got to the end of that book and was kind of feeling like, okay, I think I can explain a lot of this stuff.
As a Christian in an apologetic way.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I had a conversation at a pub one night with a couple of friends who are not Christians.
It's always at a pub.
Yeah.
I think God is probably the hottest topic at bars.
Probably, yeah.
For sure, yeah. And so we had a good conversation, and it was very respectful, and I came away from it. And I just had this sort of epiphany, I guess, that I don't know if you've heard this terminology, but I was just fan wanking. And
fan winking.
Fan wanking, which is
wanking.
like
Fan.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of the phrase.
I've never heard it.
No, but I'm going to use it from now on.
Well, as soon
What
as
does
I
it
figure
mean?
out what it means.
Fan wanking.
So what it is when, let's say you're heavily invested in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're talking with someone who is picking holes in the plot of the latest Star Wars movie, and you're making things up that there's no reason to believe from the movie itself, but you're making up explanations for why something might have happened.
You're filling in the gaps.
Yeah, exactly. And that is fan wanking.
Okay. You fan wanker. Yeah, okay.
So I realized after this conversation that this is what I was doing. I had no real basis for any of this stuff. It was kind of it was just filling in the gaps to explain something that the Bible didn't cover, and there's no real reason to believe that it was true if you took the Bible out of the equation.
Yeah. Kind of what you're doing in that moment is kind of what we were talking about prayer, is in that scenario where it's you and two atheists at a pub, and you start filling in the gaps, you're really talking to yourself. Because they've confounded you with some stuff, and you're presenting fan wanking in a way that I kind of need to shore up my own faith at this moment.
For sure. Yeah, it's a process of going, okay, well, in order to maintain my existing belief, I need to construct this other fiction around it to explain the point that you've made, incorporated into that.
Yeah.
Oh,
this is,
boy.
in my deconstruction, this is what I call duct tape and baling wire.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of having to hold this thing together.
Trying to keep it together with chewing gum or something.
Exactly.
Wow. That is something. Well, what about doctrinal things, though, Japh, like heaven and hell?
Well, so that was the main catalyst, I think, in the end, was I'd have these periodic conversations with people, and I would be thinking, yeah, I'm not super sure, drifting towards atheism, but taking it slow and not really doing anything active about it. And then when we had our first daughter in whenever she was born,
Don't let your wife hear that. Yeah.
in 2013. And so it was probably then that I really went, all right, I'm going to sort this out once and for all, because I'm going to be responsible for teaching another human being what I think is true. And if I haven't settled on that myself, that's going to be problematic, particularly given that my whole moral and ethical framework is based on this.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, where I thought you were going with that, Japh, is that when you do have your first child and you look that child in the eye, and you're the father, and Christianity is so structured by this this patriarchal relationship, the father, and there's no way, no matter what that daughter does for the rest of her life, that you would send her to eternal torture.
Right, absolutely, yeah. It doesn't. It all falls apart, really, I think, at that point. So.
Sure. At one point in my journey, I said, I will never bow the knee to a God who is not at least as good as I am. And I wouldn't do it. And so God must be less moral than me. So fuck that God.
Sure, although the explanation is always,
Choice, free will.
we don't know the mind of God. Maybe it's bad now, but better in the long run type stuff.
Oh, come on.
His ways are not our ways.
But I mean, to look into the face of your child and think, well, this child's messed up. He or she's got sin on them, and he's just born. He didn't do anything yet, and come on, the sins of the
absolutely.
father crap. That's throw that
when
away.
When I was talking with my mum about this stuff, she wasn't surprised because of a few things I'd said on Facebook, and I was like, oh.
Well, she raised you. She knows how smart you are, so she saw it coming decades ago.
She definitely had worked it out, and I'm like, oh, okay, you haven't stumbled across my Pinterest feed then, because that's the one place that I have been pinning the shit out of all sorts of like Christopher Hitchens quotes and all sorts of different things, and that just reminded me of that quote from him in reference to Abraham sacrificing Isaac, right? And Christopher Hitchens saying if God asked him to sacrifice his child to prove that he loved God, he'd be like, no way, fuck you.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's so concise.
So going back, I mean, speaking of Hitchens, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Hitchens actually was friends with Francis Collins, and they had debated each other, and it was a mutual respectful thing. Even though Collins was a Christian, he was a scientist at least, and there was somewhat of a relationship there, if I'm not mistaken. But I want to highlight here something that I think is probably relevant to our listeners, and the steps that we take. So something happens at the church politically that is a little bit of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, especially involving your own mother, and you say, okay, this is my out. Well, I would even go further back and say, I wonder, since you had so much suspicion about the theatrics of the service, it was probably okay with you to say, I'm going to go do puppets with the children's ministry while you guys freak the fuck out in here,
Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely an element of that, for sure.
Yeah.
And I dabbled a little bit with kind of playing along and seeing...
Trying your tongues.
Well, it wasn't even tongues specifically. I was trying things like... it was more like prophecy, I guess you would say.
Okay,
or
right. Oh, yeah, I did a lot of that.
Yeah, so it was like passing a message to someone in church to say, oh, hey...
I've got a word for you.
I have just, exactly. I've just been sitting here and contemplating, and I have a word for you. I hope it's helpful. But I knew that I had just made it up. I had been sitting there watching someone. You could see they were quite distressed about something and needing this time with God type of thing. And so you throw out a few kind of platitudes and nice things to say and words of encouragement. And that touches a person so deeply.
All right, this is amazing. Okay, so Bob's got the bewildered look on his face. We've hit mystery number 2 in this episode. Pay dirt for Bob.
Yeah.
No, but I think that you've really hit on something, Japh, and that is I used to operate in prophecy a lot.
So if somebody's sad,
yeah, and so you're praying. You could be praying for them from a distance, or you could actually be laying hands on them, and you're opening up your mind. Your mind is like a radar or a big dish, a
satellite dish,
dish, trying to pick up, something that you could say to this person that would be an encouragement. Number one, and the more specific you could get and be like dead on, it almost has a psychic.
Yeah,
like how'd you know that I was worried about my mom's cancer or whatever?
Yeah,
right. And so. What you're hoping for is that God would fill your mind with a word of knowledge. And by knowledge, I mean, how did you know that? Because only God could have told you that. So it's a display of how intimate you are with God as the prophet. And then this person who's really kind of maybe at their rope's end, they're discouraged, disparaged, and you can see it in their face, and you go and you could say something like, the Lord spoke to me, and he says, my child, you are precious in my sight. You are beloved of the Lord. And there's a call on your life that is not yet known to you. But in God's timing, he will reveal it to you. I'm doing it right now.
This is what you would say.
This is what I would say. I mean, I'm kind of doing it. And I see a barn. Is there something about harvest that you've sown some seeds and they're in the ground and you're waiting for them to come forth? And the Lord says, do not grow weary in waiting. Thus saith the Lord.
Wow.
It's starting to feel like John Edwards, yeah?
Yeah, and by now there are tears coming down their face because everybody's waiting for something to happen in their life. I mean, in some ways...
You're a fucking con man is what you are. Like those fucking psychics out there hurting people that are in pain, and you say that to them. Well, okay.
But the way you can justify it, even the way... I'm sure the way psychics justify it is that...
I'm helping you.
I'm helping you, even though they know it's bullshit. I don't know. This is the stuff that goes on.
People walk away from that kind of thing feeling so encouraged and bolstered. Someone who was feeling, in the pits of despair and feeling like they're reaching out to God and hoping for some kind of answer, and you've handed it to them. So they got what they needed, and they feel better. They feel like God has it in control, and they heard from him. Yeah.
This is coming back to fan winking and duct tape. Let me. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because a televangelist like Peter Popoff was exposed for having, a hearing aid in his ear.
Somebody's telling him,
and somebody's in
That's
the
an
lobby.
Old psychic thing. That's
it's a televangelist thing. They've got people in the lobby walking around with, and they might be doing kind of a man on the street thing. They might literally even have a microphone, and they'll, coming up and saying, "Hey, where'd you travel from to come to this service, such and such?" Mm-hmm. What do you do for a living? I mean, they're literally kind of getting biography information about this person.
Sure.
And then once the service starts, they've compiled all this information and they're feeding it to the pastor via this earplug. Now, here's what I'm getting to. Let's say that Peter Popoff is a good man, and he's not a con, at least in his own mind, and that he's a moral guy, and that he really does want to make the world a better place. Let's just say that he's got pure motives.
Okay.
But what he's doing, and the way he justifies it at the end of the night, is these people get back in their car and they drive home, and like Japh is saying, they're encouraged, they're lifted, their spirits, their joy is restored or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he can go to bed at night feeling good about himself because God is not showing up. And I'm an ambassador of God. I'm an agent of God. I've been sent out commissioned by God to do his work. We are his hands and feet on the earth. And so I just did the work of God because God's not doing it. I mean, this is the duct tape. This is the filling in the blanks, the God of the gaps, the fan wanking. It's fascinating. I'm just trying to getting inside the head of what.
Yeah, like how could you sleep at night after doing that?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But you can, because you tell yourself you're doing the right thing.
I'm just speculating, but that's a possibility. Yeah.
Wow. In the meantime, you're collecting as much money as you can, too.
So getting back to the steps, first step is, I'm not sure I like what's going on in this service. My mom needs some help in the children's ministry. That's my out. Well, then she gets fired or demoted, and that's my out. Then you spend, it looks like about 8 years in the closet doing your own work. And the first thing might have been, okay, church politics and God and hell, those can go, but Jesus is cool, and helping people is cool. And so I'm going to salvage that. And that's what we do, Bob, is we, if the ship is sinking and we have to start throwing things off, we're going to pick the worst things to throw off first. And so...
is that what happened with you, Japh, as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say that I was whittling things down. And even once I got to the point of this, last couple of years and throwing off Christianity altogether, I definitely felt this. I remember discussing with my wife, super ironic moment of where I felt like the scales lifted from my eyes, so to speak, and I was born again atheist. Yeah, and
no, that's so true.
It was just an amazing feeling.
I totally relate.
You get that? Yeah.
It really does feel epiphanal and the truth. Here's the thing. I can't. Jesus said the truth will set you free. Damn straight it does. It really does.
Wow.
Yeah, and so even digging deeper and then going, okay, so I've decided there's definitely not a God, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine that means there's no afterlife in my mind. And then it was like, well, okay, so what was Jesus doing getting around if there isn't a God?
Yeah.
And so then I stumbled across a book by Raphael Latasta called Jesus Did Not Exist. And so I started reading through that, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
This whole thing is just, it's so, I've read quite a lot from Bart Ehrman and Raphael and a few others about sort of Robert Bryce and things. Yeah, about mythicists versus historical Jesus. And it seems to me that you can't necessarily know with 100% certainty in either direction.
Right.
But the fact that that's the case in itself is just just amazing.
Yeah, that's agnosticism.
Yeah,
right there.
and Urban points out, too, that there's, with the exception of, I guess, a couple of lines in Josephus, the historian Josephus, but even that, they said, was added, that there's no external information other than the Bible about Jesus. You can't find it anywhere, historically, I mean.
And if there was such a figure doing the miracles that are in the Bible...
You'd think you would find a lot of stuff about him.
You'd think it'd show up in some kind of...
it's 2,000 years ago. I mean, things
There
have
should have been a
changed.
few papyrus leaves with some shit on it.
Something, yeah.
So, but, at minimal, I mean, even when we're piecing, there's a couple of charismatic guys on the beach. There's, some stuff goes down, and then... the telephone game or the rumor mill, eventually it becomes, something, and it's pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle or a Frankenstein.
I'd go with that. Yeah. Wow.
So, but I guess that, I'll be honest with you, Japh, about 17 minutes into this conversation, I thought, we are almost done here.
Oh, no, this is good.
And then it just took off. And we've touched on some really fascinating psychologies and insights into why people do what we do. And this is a big deal. And I think so. You got to a place where you embraced, okay, there's no afterlife and there's no God watching the shop. I mean, it sounds like it was so slow, like unlike a Band-Aid. It's less painful in deconversion when you go slow. And you're gentle with yourself, you're patient with the process, and it's less of a shock and awe the bottom falls out of your life, and there's a little bit of delirium, or at least confusion, or
Yeah, we have had people on that have said it just ruined them. It just destroyed them when they figured it out. It's like Cass said, the bottom fell out. But not with you. It seemed like you sort of had a soft landing.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think generally the Australian sort of approach to Christianity even has helped a lot with that. Like, any of my friends who are aware that I'm an atheist now are fine with it, happy to have conversations and all that kind of stuff. I'm actually super lucky for my context in that regard, and even my wife. So we've been married for 9 years, and for a significant portion of that, she wasn't raised a Christian, and she had some unpleasant experiences with church in her sort of, late teen years, where she's like sort of tried it and didn't really work out.
Right.
But she kind of, when we got married, or when we got together and when we got married, she was aware that she's married a Christian, and so she would like to believe that there's an afterlife and that there's a God and stuff. So she'll do her best to try and believe that. And so when I came to sort of sit down with her and go, oh, hey, I've just been researching a lot of stuff lately, and I've decided I don't believe any of this stuff. And she just went, oh, I'm so grateful. That's such a relief.
So relieved.
Wow.
Yeah, and
isn't that
so that was a huge relief for me too, because I didn't want her to feel like she kind of, had not married who she thought she married, or that she was no longer going to have support in trying to be a Christian and that kind of stuff. So.
How many times we've had people on here that have said the marriage was over when that happened?
Yeah, it's destroyed.
They just destroyed it. Absolutely.
So in many ways, I mean, I can hear it. I mean, that's what you're saying, is that you're aware of your gratefulness for. Your soft landing was, in some ways, you had less distance to fall than maybe if you were an American, number one.
Definitely.
And then number two, your wife kind of went through a similar thing and you landed in the same spot. So, well done.
Yeah, well done. Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. The main trick, I think, now is for us is trying to establish good moral and ethical framework to raise our kids with and to teach them. Because my daughter already she's 4, and she's already starting to ask some of the hard questions, saying, we're about to go to sleep. We've just finished reading a story. The light's been turned off, and she goes, Daddy, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to die. And it's like, okay. So she started asking these kinds of questions, and I want to be able to have good answers for her for all the future questions as well, not just because that's how we do it.
Yeah, sure. But what do you say when the little girl says, I don't want to die? Or ask you, are you going to die?
Yeah. She's done both. Or we saw a dead insect, and she's like, oh, what's that? I'm like, oh, it's a dead fly, just not thinking. She's like, what's dead? I'm like, oh, this is a difficult thing to explain. And so,
wow.
Yeah, trying to explain that in a way that's...
Well, what do you say?
Yeah, there is no explanation for that.
Do you say, oh, don't worry. Yes, everybody dies, but it's going to be a long time before I die. So don't worry, and mommy too, and those kind of things?
That was kind of the last thing that we said about death in particular was that most people live for a long, long time, and there's no reason to think that she wouldn't as well. Mm-hmm. And that, what death is... basically just that the fly has stopped working. It doesn't work anymore. It can't do anything now. It's just going to stay like that forever.
Right. Wow.
Heavy stuff.
That is heavy. That is heavy.
Yeah. And I just want her to be able to have answers for any of those kinds of things, just a basis for how do you treat other people, and how do you decide what to do with extra money that you have, for example, just all these kinds of things, looking at the news and what's going on in the world. You need to have a good answer for that stuff. And I think Christianity has maybe it's not a good answer, but they have an answer. And so now that I don't have that, reevaluating everything from the bottom is my main sort of goal at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what she's going to face when she goes to, kindergarten or first grade, second grade, and what have you. If she faces other Christians, how's she going to react to that? I wonder.
we're having some experience with that already. With her, she spends a lot of time at Nanny's house and my mum, and so teaching her to be gentle about that stuff even, and this is what Daddy believes and Mummy believes, and this is what Nanny believes, and
we'll go from there. Yeah.
Yeah,
wow. There's no right or wrong. I mean, you just have to take it a day at a time, I guess. Wow.
So let's move into the light stuff, and
sure.
After we've talked about the terror of death hitting a 4-year-old. So, do you have any hobbies, Japh?
I do. It used to be my sort of bio around the place was that I was a collector of hobbies. I quite like anything that has a bit of a ritual to it. Really, I like to collect coffee.
You collect coffee? You mean you have different kinds of coffee or something? You like different tastes?
Different kinds of coffee, different ways of making coffee.
Oh.
Have you ever roasted, so coffee beans when they're fresh off the vine are green.
Right.
And then you can put them in a skillet.
Really?
You can put them in a skillet and roast, kind of, I don't know if you put them in oil or not, but I had a friend he was a missionary in Ethiopia that we used to support. It was an old college buddy.
Yeah.
And when he came back from Ethiopia to visit, he brought some Ethiopian coffee beans and roasted them right there on our stovetop. And then we ground them, and then we drank it. And they put butter in their coffee.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
That kind of stuff? Is that the ritual of coffee making?
Yeah, well, it's all different kinds of things. So coffee beans are the seeds of a cherry, right? So they come out of the cherry, and they're green initially, and then you dry them, and then you ship them around the world, and then you roast them, usually.
Okay.
And so, but coffee in different places is made differently. So
you're talking about going online and ordering coffee?
Yeah, a bit of that. We have a subscription to coffee. We get a kilo of coffee beans delivered every month, and I'm sort of fine-tuning how I make my espressos. I like to make a Turkish coffee, which is made a little bit differently on a stovetop in a small copper vessel. And you kind of leave it. It's ground much finer, and so you end up with like a mud puck kind of at the bottom of your
boy.
Cup. Yeah, you don't drink that bit.
Get a spoon. I guess.
So you like it pretty stout.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And you drink it black.
Yeah, I do. I drink double espressos a lot of the time and that kind of stuff.
That's why you're up so early.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I quite like different alcohols. I like single malt scotches. I like absinthe.
Ooh, baby.
I also like to do bonsai. I like to do paintballing.
Okay, so go back to bonsai. What is that?
Yeah, what's bonsai?
So bonsai were like small trees, basically.
Bonsai trees, sure. I thought
that's what I was thinking.
You were flying a plane or something.
So do you have some bonsai trees, little trees in your house?
Yeah, I have a couple, and I used to have a lot more, but I went traveling, which is another hobby. And
now, what's the ritual around bonsais?
You clip them, I guess.
Oh, you keep them clipped?
Yeah, you need to keep them clipped. So a bonsai tree you can do with a lot of different kinds of trees. You're just putting them in a pot, and you're trying to restrict its growth, and you want it to grow kind of as small as you can, and so you will help to shape the direction the branches grow in to get a nice shape, and you'll prune off the first sort of flush of leaves when the leaves grow in, because then when the second flush grow back, they grow back smaller.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's lucky that trees don't have feelings.
Exactly. I felt like a Chinese woman with her scrunching her feet or something.
Yeah,
right.
Or
yeah.
something.
Is that Japanese? I don't remember.
Yeah, whatever. But I think it is Japanese.
So,
well, my gosh.
And then paintballing, you mentioned.
Paintballing, okay.
I've done some paintballing. As a youth pastor, I used to have a set of 12 paintball guns and
really
take kids out in the forest and
shoot them.
We play capture the flag and.
It used to be illegal here, so.
Really? Yeah. Paintballing is illegal, or was? Huh.
It was. It's only just in the last year or so it's sort of become legal again in my state. We had a shooting massacre of 30-something people.
Yes, I remember that. That rarely happens in Australia too, and that just drove people crazy, didn't it?
Right. It reminds me of the Jim Jeffries skit about this, where in Australia we had a big shooting and the government said, "How about no guns?" And Aussies went, "Yeah, that seems fair." And then in America, you have lots of shootings, and the government says, maybe some restrictions on your guns, and everyone shouts, no, fuck no, don't take our guns.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly it.
So speaking of Jim Jeffries, I'm glad you mentioned him, a great atheist comedian coming out of Australia. Was he any influence in your deconversion?
Not really. I had only really come across a couple of his things, and none of them were really very, very atheist. It was more podcasts, actually, that sort of played a big part, like Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and Scathing Atheist, Thinking Atheist, lots of those kind of ones.
Right.
Cool. Great. How about movies? You go to movies or you watch TV a lot, or how do you, or read? What's your thing?
What's your media hobby?
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the above.
Okay.
I work from home and I hate silence, so I quite like to have TV show running in the background and that kind of thing. So I'm quite into sci-fi. Been watching Killjoys a bit lately, which is a bit of nice background sci-fi, or The Expanse if you want to get more interested.
Wow.
The Expanse is a show?
The Expanse, I don't know.
Yeah, I read the books and then found that they were doing a show as well. It's quite fun, like near future sci-fi.
Yeah, we watched The Dark Mirror, which was pretty, or The Black Mirror. Black
Mirror, yeah.
Oh man, that's good. That was on
okay.
Netflix.
So I'm going to drill down a little bit here,
All right,
Japh.
sure.
What is your crazy? What is your pathology? Like, what is your vice?
There was a show on Channel 4 in the UK a couple of years ago about psychopaths, and they did a test that they made available online that's kind of like, are you a psychopath? And you answer a bunch of questions, and it gives you kind of a percentage rating against other people who've taken the test.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my wife took the test, and I think she scored in the mid-teens or something, like 14 or 16, maybe
Yeah,
12.
a little closer to Fred Rogers than Jeffrey Dahmer.
And I think my mom got about a 12 or 14, and my dad got like a 40, 43 or something.
It's men.
And I scored a 76. And,
Oh.
So you pretty much are a psychopath. Huh?
I'm glad you're across the other side of the world and you're going to chase Bob and I down and kill us.
so my wife always brings that up anytime she can. The first time we meet a new person, hi, this is my husband, and he scored 76 on a psychopath test.
Oh, your wife sounds great.
She's a light
She's
sleeper.
a funny one. Yeah, light sleeper.
Actually, she is a really light sleeper.
Well, she better
so is
be.
my wife.
But they say that a surgeon or CEOs are statistically much likely to be a psychopath.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you've ever referred to yourself as stoic.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say stoic.
See, that's what I think of, is that if you're less emotionally moved by visual stimuli, or even audible stimuli, or the hearing of screams, or the watching of a rape, and if they've got electrodes, or horror movie or something, they've got electrodes hooked up to your, or even sweat glands on your palms, and you have a very small reaction, you're going to score high on the psychopathic test.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think also, like, my mum is super emotional type of person,
Right.
and I saw more of her growing up than I did of Dad, and I think that while I may not have a natural inclination towards empathy, I've certainly learned a lot of compassion.
Yeah.
Which I think makes up for it a lot.
Sure.
So was your mom a worrier?
Oh, yeah,
So when you were out past midnight,
which was regularly. Yeah, this is why her praying at night was a thing.
yeah, a comfort. You're the source.
Oh, that's great.
I'm the source. I'd be out until 3 a.m. partying, or maybe later, and so she'd be up and worrying, and
Yeah.
Well, you're a fascinating character. I can see you around these bonsai trees around the house with your trimmings. You're.
I'd just stop over for the scotch, to tell you the truth, but that's where I'd go.
But I have a friend at Vanderbilt. He's a professor, and he's kind of a coffee connoisseur. And if you're a coffee of the month club guy, and you get a coffee every month from a different country, and
That's cool.
it's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Nice little hobbies. And these are meaning-making things, man, when there's no God and there's no, these are, there is so much beauty. Oh, in fact, I'm so glad I remembered this. We're going to close with this. And
Okay.
I've got a 19-year-old son. I've got three daughters and then a baby boy, so he's my youngest. He's still living at home, but he's going to junior college. And because he's young, and I deconverted and we left church about 11 years ago, he has the least amount of Christian influence as a preacher's kid.
Right.
And he became fascinated with science, evolution, chemistry, botany. From the young age, he was always noticing plants, and then he quickly learned their names. And we'd be driving down the road, and he'd be naming the trees, and the brush and the hedge. And so he wrote this today and posted it on Facebook. And when he read it to me, I broke into tears. This is, so I'm setting it up as I already know I love it. But I'd like to get your reaction as a thinker. I mean, I'm just still struck that from age 4 to 8, you were already pulling the thread, and I've been fascinated with your story. So I'm going to read this and then get your reaction.
Okay.
Sure.
He said, when society doesn't respect and listen to scientists, that society is actually disrespecting themselves, the planet on which they live, the people they share it with, and anyone who has yet to exist. You and I are the beautiful product of billions of years of non-stop dedication to learning, adapting, evolving, creating. I don't know about you, but that alone makes me feel extremely special. We are connected to everything in the universe. We are made of atoms, just like the sun. Our atoms are just really, really good at what they do. Our atoms give us the same supernatural opportunity to look around and ask, why am I here? Why is here? Where is here? Wow, what a gift. Take this gift for granted. Ignore the answers countless men and women have dedicated their lives to answering. Ignore your true history. Rewrite your own. And you will have successfully disrespected and ridiculed the very existence of you and every single atom that keeps you alive and well.
Wow, that's pretty insightful.
All right, so you're 35, I'm 51, Bob's 63, and Bob and I sat here and said, you're 19?
That's right. I thought of that maybe, I don't know, in my 40s. I can't remember.
Yeah. I mean,
he's way ahead of us.
And look at Japh, your 4-year-old daughter and your soon-to-be-born newborn child that's coming. Look at the head start that these kids have. And what a great gift. And in my old school of thinking, if you weren't a man of God raising your children up in the fear of the Lord, then you were doing them a disfavor. And this is doing them a favor of never complicating their life, hijacking their imagination, destroying their self-agency and identity and self-respect. No, this is secularism, this is naturalism, this is atheism, this is agnosticism, and it's giving the kids a chance to, see the world as it is and be honest and maintain some integrity when it comes to facing reality.
Yeah. When I sat down with Mum recently and were talking with her about becoming an atheist, one of the things she said was, "Do you resent me for the way I raised you?" And I said, "Not at all." I said, "I know that we're all a product of our environment, and I don't resent you, but I do wish that I hadn't been impeded by religion."
Oh, that's a good way to put it. But bless her heart. I think that's wonderful. We have to acknowledge that whenever good people, are doing the best they can with what they've got, there's no malice.
Right.
And in fact, there's the opposite of malice. There's a desire to do the right thing.
Yep.
And so, you don't resent that. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
And yet you said, if I do resent something, it's not you per se, because your life was hijacked by this thing too. I mean, you're a victim of it too. So we can have compassion and that's beautiful. Japh, thanks so much, man.
What a great show.
From the other side of the world, from the next day, from the future.
That's right, from the future. Japh Thomson. No, it was great. It was really wonderful having you, man.
Thanks, guys. It was a real pleasure.
Japh Thomson.
Thompson without a P.
Without a P. Thompson.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah. I loved it. Wow, what a nice guy. Again, here if I was in Australia, I'd like to visit this guy. I like to be a friend of his.
We fall in love with our guests every week.
They're just such a nice fella. Yeah.
So, new word, fan wanking.
Fan wanking. You wanker. Fan wanker.
So it's when you're doing the God of the Gaps thing, when you're trying to fill in where the Bible is silent, where science is silent, and you're trying to prop up your faith.
Yeah.
Fan wanking.
So that's a new one.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing was, I learned many, many things this time through.
You learned something about the psychosis, or
Well, there's this giant mass delusion. It's just so interesting.
And you've seen videos of people falling out, and it's kind of sad, because what you're seeing is people desperate to feel special, and it's so common in humanity. It happens from childhood on up. If somehow we're ignored or overlooked, we feel small. And we, especially in a natural universe, absent of God and supernaturalism, that, the pale blue dot, one of the most daunting things, we got a little bit into death and dying with the daughter's questions and such, and I can't help but reference Ernest Becker's Denial of Death, number one book I recommend to anybody as far as understanding why people do what they do. But what we run into is just the insignificance that we feel. I know when he was talking about his daughter, we had a little puppy, and this would have been back in Oklahoma, ran out in front of a car and was killed. No, actually, this particular incident, that happened, but this particular incident was a cat that passed away, one of our pets. And our oldest daughter might have been 6 at the time, Lydia. And when we told her that Goldie didn't exist anymore, I mean, it really is hard to explain. What is death? And, in Japh's case, I think his daughter saw an insect or something.
Yeah, a fly.
But when the cat died, Lydia just went out on the back porch by herself, sat on the steps, put her elbows on her knees and her palms on her cheeks, and you could tell she was just contemplating. And this is a shock to the system. It just doesn't occur to us that what we're experiencing as life and sentient existence comes to an end. And what the fuck does that feel like, look like? And this is where the imagination takes off for afterlife fantasies and immortality narratives that we have to come up with, because this is just too much to swallow. Not only for a child, most, I would say all adults don't really know where to go with this. And
so Lydia had her childish thoughts, and men and women build religions.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
well, either way, they're both doing their best to compartmentalize this somewhere. Yeah. Where do I file this?
Yeah.
And how do I juxtapose my own existence with the cessation of existence?
Yeah, I know.
It's why there's whole college courses on death and dying. It's just a fascinating subject.
And these are the big questions. These are the questions that are asked and have been asked since the beginning. So,
ontology.
Yes, the ontology. Thank you so much.
But anyway, good story, and you're right about the soft landing. I think this is not a real traumatic thing for Japh, and yet,
well, he's a psychopath.
That's right.
I killed myself.
He's not emotional.
I'm kidding.
Kidding. And yet, what did he say though? He went looking for community.
Yes, he did.
He went on YouTube. He went on podcasts. And
he found us
because he was lonely.
And isn't that
he found us on the other side of the world.
It doesn't matter if it's in this country, Canada, United
England,
Kingdom,
Scotland. I've got a software that shows the percentage of downloads.
But I mean,
the
stories are so similar.
Oh, yeah.
And the loneliness.
Yeah.
He talked about that too. About how, I got no place to turn. I have no one to talk to about this.
Yeah.
Well, you got us, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, and people find us, and that is the That's probably the main feedback that we get is I thought I was alone. I had a guy. This is a sweet story. We'll close with this.
Okay.
a guy who was a classical guitarist, and back in the early episodes, I used his music for segue music, and I'd asked him for more, and we kept missing each other as far as, I'm fixing to go into the recording studio and do some more, but he was a Patreon supporter, listened to the show, and interesting guy, and he wrote me this week, and he said, "Hey, Cass, I just want to let you know that I'm stopping my Patreon support, and I just wanted to tell you so that it wasn't just a disappearance on my part. I have really moved on. I don't think about religion. I don't listen to atheist podcasts anymore. I'm over it. The trauma, I'm healed. I'm not necessarily needing to hear these conversations over again." And I thought to myself, we really are kind of working our way out of a job, and that's a good thing, because now we won't, because we can continue to do the show because there's a factory line of deconverters on their way that are going to hear it for the first time this week.
Yeah, true.
And so even though for you and I, this is 150 episodes or whatever this one is, when I don't know as we're taping it, but people move on, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I appreciated the integrity and the respect he had to write me.
How about that? Well, thank you, Doctor. You've cured him, Doctor. Yes. Well, that's great. Actually, he cured himself, but it was nice that we were there for the time being, and as we were, he would put a couple of bucks in the jar. Yeah. But now, I'm cool. I'm good.
Yeah.
So good for him. I
appreciate that, and it's funny because when he started listening, we were maybe averaging 300, 500 downloads per episode or something.
Oh my! Now we're way up.
And now we're 5,000.
Yeah. And growing.
So in a way, I mean, when people stop listening, but more are coming. So.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what,
it's a good work.
I'll come back for another one then. How's that? Next time.
Will you please?
I will.
Uncle Bob.
I will. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man.
Gone.